Hello there. This is the AI Breach Report. Sorry, the Weekend Intelligence Brief for this weekend, Saturday 22nd to Sunday 23rd. So I think I should start without much further delay. This weekend, the UK's public finances threw up a number that nobody wanted to see 2 months before an autumn budget. The July borrowing figures came in worse than forecast, and the three voices that immediately entered the debate about what comes next couldn't agree on anything except that the October budget is going to be consequential. At the same time, fresh data confirmed that the cost squeeze on small and medium businesses is no longer a forecast. It's already arrived, with 53,000 businesses now classed as critically financially distressed and rising. And Britain's largest private hospital group is waiting on a private equity bidder who says it's done its homework. It just needs a few more days to sort the money out. This is the Weekend Intelligence Brief. I'm Frederick Kwakuliaka, and let's get into it. Segment 1, the July deficit and the budget that's coming for you. The Office for National Statistics published public sector finance data on Friday, the 21st of August, and the headline number deserves your full attention. Public sector net borrowing for July came in at £1.8 billion. That's above the same month last year, and it's £2.3 billion above what the Office for Budget Responsibility had forecast for the year to date. Public debt now stands at 94.1% of GDP. Here's what makes it worse. July brought in record self-assessment income tax receipts, £17.1 billion record, and it still wasn't enough. Higher welfare spending, the debt interest, wages, and procurement wiped out the income again. When a record tax take isn't enough to hit the forecast, that tells you something important about the structural gap the Chancellor is managing. And it lands with 2 months to go before the 28th of October budget. Three voices immediately entered the debate about what that budget might contain, and they said three very different things. Panmure Liberum's economist Simon French argued the Chancellor might not need to raise taxes at all if economic growth and equity markets hold up well enough to offset the pressure. That's the optimistic case. It depends on things going right between now and October. Former Bank of England chief economist Andy Haldane took the opposite view. He's calling for a 3-year moratorium on further tax increases for households and businesses. And he's framing it with something he calls a growth delivery test. Any proposed fiscal measure gets assessed against its effect on private sector spending, investment, employment, and risk-taking before it's implemented. If you run a business with between 50 and 200 employees, a moratorium is the single outcome from this budget cycle you would most welcome, because it's not the level of tax that makes planning difficult, it's the repeated changing of it. The Green Party, meanwhile, proposed a 38% windfall tax on bank profits above million pounds. They say it raises 19 billion annually. The government response so far has been to point at existing support measures rather than engage with the proposal directly. Now, none of this tells you what the budget will actually contain. What it does tell you is that the political pressure to find revenue from somewhere is real, organized, and present in the public conversation at exactly the same moment the underlying data got worse. The specific measures that have been named in serious economic commentary this week: national insurance on savings and investment income, pension tax relief, inheritance tax, property taxation, none of them are confirmed. All of them are live. Any business planning 2027 on a single tax scenario right now is taking a risk that doesn't need to be taken. One practical detail before we move on: HMRC is preparing to send approximately 1.8 million simple assessment letters to individuals whose income from savings, interest, dividends, or untaxed pensions wasn't collected through payee or self-assessment this year. Yorkshire Building Society estimates that 5.3 million non-ISA savings accounts will generate more than £1,000 of interest this year. The frozen personal savings allowance catching people purely because rates are higher, not because their saving behavior changed. If any of your staff are in that group, they're about to get an unexpected tax bill in the post, calculated from data your business may have supplied to HMRC. A short internal communication explaining what a simple assessment letter is before the letters arrive will save your HR and finance teams a lot of anxious questions. It's a small thing, and it's one of the few things on this weekend's list you can actually deal with immediately. Segment 2, the cost squeeze that's already here. If issue 1 is about what might happen in October, issue 2 is about what's happening right now. Begbie Trainer Group published research this week showing more than 53,000 UK businesses are currently in critical financial distress. That's 9% more than a year ago. A further 674,000 are in significant distress, short of that threshold but not far from it. The sectors deteriorating fastest are consumer-facing, leisure and culture up 27%, hotels up nearly 27%, health and education up 23%, wholesale up nearly 21%. Begbie Trainer's own warning is that further rises in inflation or energy costs could push insolvencies higher through 2027 rather than letting them plateau. The second data point is forward-looking but comes with a concrete price tag. Research from Anglia Ruskin University puts the national cost of 0 hours contract reforms at up to £2.89 billion. The reform would require businesses to offer guaranteed hours based on a worker's regular shift pattern, give reasonable notice of shifts and cancellations, and compensate them when that notice falls short. Around 1.2 million people are currently employed mainly on 0-hour contracts. The critical issue right now is that the detailed mechanics of how this actually works in practice haven't been finalized, which means businesses in retail, hospitality, healthcare staffing, and professional services that rely on flexible cover can see the direction the cost is heading, but can't yet model the exact number. Third data point, nearly half of the 420 pharmacy owners surveyed by the National Pharmacy Association say they are considering closure because of rising business rates. 55% are considering relocating to cheaper premises. What makes pharmacies a sharp case study is that they can't respond to higher costs by raising prices. Most dispensing income is set by NHS contract terms. The revenue is fixed, the costs are not. There is a more encouraging side to this week's data, and it shouldn't be ignored. GfK's consumer confidence indicator hit its strongest level since August 2024. UK private sector productivity rose 1.8% year-on-year in Q2, with some analysts contributing part of that to early AI adoption. Those are genuine positives, but they don't cancel the distress figures, and a business owner who reads only the encouraging half of this week's data is going to arrive at October underprepared. The retail sales figure from July deserves a specific mention. Volumes fell 0.5%, the first decline since April, with non-food sales down 1.3%. Retailers blamed extreme heat, fewer discount events, and consumers having brought purchases forward in earlier promotional periods. There's a timing effect in there, but read July's retail softness alongside the beige bee trainer distress figures, and you're not looking at two separate data points. You're looking at the same underlying pressure showing up in two different data sets at the same time. If your business extends credit into hospitality, leisure, or non-food retail, that coincidence is worth treating as confirmation rather than noise. Segment 3, Spire Healthcare Tosca Fund and what this day's cover tells you. Britain's largest private hospital group, Spire Healthcare, confirmed on Friday, the 21st of August, that its second largest shareholder, Tosca Fund Asset Management, has been granted a fifth extension on its takeover deadline. The new deadline is the 3rd of September. Tosca Fund's proposal, originally tabled in May, is 250 pence per share, a 66% premium to where the share price was the day before, valuing the company at approximately £1 billion. What makes this week's extension different from the previous four is the stated reason. Tosca Fund says due diligence is complete. The additional time is specifically to finalize financing that it describes as near final. Under the takeover panel's Rule 2.6 up or shut up regime, bidders normally commit to or walk away to the deadline. The panel granting a fifth extension on the basis of concluded due diligence and nearly arranged financing is a materially stronger signal than any of the earlier extensions. Something is coming. The question is when, not if. Spire isn't just a hospital estate. It's the largest independent provider of NHS talking therapies in England. It provides occupational health and workplace health services to more than 1,400 employers. It runs private GP practices alongside its surgical capacity. Any change of ownership here flows through into occupational health arrangements and workplace benefit contracts. That, excuse me a moment, I have to plug in my power is going down, so that's better now. So let's continue. We are talking about Yeah, Spire isn't just a hospital estate. It's the largest independent provider of NHS talking therapies in England. It provides occupational health and workplace health services to more than 1,400 employees. It runs private GP practices alongside its surgical capacity. Any change of ownership here flows through into occupational health arrangements and workplace benefit contracts that a significant share of medium enterprises rely on directly. The strategic logic for why private capital keeps returning to Spire Tosca Fund's earlier opposition to the Ramsay bid in 2021, Bridgepoint and Triton circling earlier this year, Bridgepoint later stepping back, Tosca Fund now approaching a firm offer is the same time each time. Record NHS waiting lists are pushing patients towards self-pay and insured private treatment regardless of the economic weather. Sorry. That demand is structurally protected. It doesn't respond to inflation the way discretionary consumer spending does. That asymmetry is exactly what investors have been buying into, and it's exactly what makes this deal worth watching if your business has any exposure to UK private healthcare. Three stories this weekend, and they share a single underlying shape that's worth naming directly, because seeing it clearly is more useful than treating each story as its own isolated problem. The fiscal story, the cost squeeze story, and the Spire story are all at their core about the same thing: which businesses have their demand protected from the current economic environment and which don't. The pharmacies in the NPA survey have fixed revenue set by NHS contract terms. Their costs are rising, their income can't follow. They are exposed. The big bit trainer business in critical distress, leisure hotels, consumer discretionary, their revenue follows consumer confidence and disposable income, both of which are under pressure. They are exposed. Spire Healthcare, by contrast, benefits from a waiting list backlog that sends patients into private care regardless of the economic cycle. Its demand is structurally protected. That's why the premium is 60% and the bidder keeps coming back. The question this weekend for every business owner listening is simple. Does your demand look more like the pharmacies or more like Spire? If your revenue is set by someone else's contract terms that can't follow costs higher, or if it follows discretionary consumer spending, that's now clearly softening. That's now clearly softening than the combination of a budget with an unknown tax outcome, a rising distress environment, and a global bond market that's unsettled at the same time is not a future risk, it's a current one. And the businesses navigating it best right now are the ones that asked that question honestly before October, not after it. First, if your 2027 planning runs off a single tax scenario, build at least two more this weekend. One assumes meaningful new revenue measures land in October. One assumes restraint. If you hold variable rate debt, a refinancing coming up, or currency exposure, add a third variant that assumes bond yields stay elevated into the autumn. Because this week's US Treasury market showed that assumption can no longer be treated as remote, and if any of your staff are likely to receive one of the 1.8 million simple assessment letters HMRC is preparing to send, draft a short internal notice explaining what it is before it arrives. It takes less than an hour, and it will save your HR function a disproportionate amount of confusion. Second, Review your credit exposure and your staffing cost model against this week's specific data. Not a general sense that conditions are difficult, but the actual sectors and numbers from Begbie, Trainer, and Anglia Ruskin. If you extend credit into hospitality, leisure, healthcare, or wholesale, tighten monitoring on those accounts this week. If you rely on 0 hours or irregular hour staffing, start modeling the higher end of the £2.9 billion reform estimate against your own headcount now, before the mechanics are finalized, sorry. And if your revenue is fixed by external contract or reimbursement terms, run a closure or relocation stress test this weekend, however uncomfortable it feels, because nearly half of regulated pharmacy owners are already doing exactly that. Third, if any workplace health, occupational health, or insured medical benefit contract your business holds sits inside the SPI healthcare chain, ask your provider directly in writing how a change of control would be handled. Get the answer before the 3rd of September, not after an announcement. More broadly, if your board has any healthcare adjacent investment, partnership, or outsourcing decision under consideration, use Tosca Fund's progression from prolonged due diligence to near final financing as a live benchmark for how fast a genuinely advanced process can move once the fundamental justification shifts. That's the weekend business intelligence brief for Saturday and Sunday, the 22nd and 23rd of August. 2026. Thank you for listening. I'm Frederick Wakuliaka. The AI Breach Report returns on Wednesday with fresh incident and vulnerability coverage. If you are finding these briefings useful, subscribe directly at the link. From the 7th of September, the full brief goes to direct subscribers. Stay sharp and I'll see you shortly. I'll be bringing out the AI Breach Report for the week ending. It will come out on Monday. So with all that said and done, see you